Hello everyone, thank you for watching. My name is Mike Leonard and I grew up in Lawler, went to the Lawler grade school, Catholic grade school, and then the Lawler High School, graduated in 1960, the last class of the Lawler High School. About 1970 or so, I interviewed my grandmother, Nellie Keegan. She was just about 90 years old at the time. She was born in 1881. And I interviewed her for some family history. And she quickly starts the interview by mentioning the names Philip Sheridan and Dynamite Jack O'Brien. Here's a recording.
Would that be your grandfather or your great-grandfather? My father would be your great-grandfather. He and General Philip Sheridan were second cousins. Was that it?
General Philip Sheridan were second cousins?
Mm-hmm. Whatever he'd done, he was just another soldier.
Yeah.
And what else to tell you about? And I'll tell you about Dynamite Jack O'Brien. I'll tell you about him too. Dynamite Jack O'Brien.
Yeah.
The fellow took the shipload of dynamite to Cuba. It was the year of the Spanish-American War. In 1897 or 98, along in there, I think it was 1897, 98.
Okay.
Philip Sheridan wasn't just another soldier, as my grandmother stated. He was the general in the Civil War for the North, and Dynamite Jack O'Brien ran guns and supplies, ammunition, dynamite to the Cuban rebels. I think they were stationed mostly in Panama at the time. They were trying to take back Cuba from Spain, or the Spaniards. And it's about the same time that the battleship Maine, the U.S. battleship Maine, blew up in Havana Harbor mysteriously. And America blamed Spain for this, and this is the beginning of the Spanish-American War. And eventually the Cuban rebels, the Americans, threw the Spanish army out of Cuba, and Cuba now went back into the hands of the rebels. Only to be taken back, or Cuba to be taken back in around 1960 by Fidel Castro, who brought in the Russians with their nuclear-tipped missiles. And here we go. Dynamite Jack O'Brien and the General Phil Sheridan were cousins. They had another cousin, Jane. Jane married Michael Edward Keegan. Michael Edward Keegan would be my great-great-grandfather. They had several children. One they named Michael Keegan, after the dad. And he would be my great-grandfather. Michael Keegan married, and his wife had several kids. One is named Catherine. Everybody called her Nellie, and this is the person who I'm interviewing. Eventually, Nellie married Ray Leonard, and they had two babies, Eileen and Donald is my dad. My grandmother reflected on Lawler back in her day.
It's a nice town, a very nice town. We had 2 hotels and 2 banks, 2 shoemaker shops, and we had 2 blacksmith shops, and we had 2 millinery stores. Oh my Lord, we had about 7 stores, different kinds of stores, and 2 millinery stores. And we had 3 churches, Lutheran, Congregation, and Catholic. And we had, I don't have everything, but it was a real boom time many years ago. But that died out too.
Tell me about the railroad.
Well, then the railroad got coming up towards Lawler. A man by the name of John Lawler in Dubuque. They couldn't finish it when they got down on the other side of Monona, the other side of McGregor, I guess. They had no money. They ran out of money, all those railroad men. But this John Lawler decided he had some money, and he decided to build on farther. So he got them all working on the railroad, Dad and some other men. And he worked on the railroad from down around McGregor till they got out to the other side of Mason City. I forget where, out the other side of Mason City. He worked at that. It took a couple of years to do that, too. And that's the way it was. They just lived and existed. Lived and existed. That was it.
According to my grandmother, my great-grandfather Keegan worked on a railroad, and this is a watch I discovered in our home, as well as a sledgehammer. And this is a general purpose sledgehammer. Had no use on the railroad. Wasn't the type that was used on the railroad. And online, I discovered that this was a Civil War era or pre-Civil War era sledgehammer, as that watch was made, and that watch was made about 1907. Other than that, I've got one other artifact that was discovered in our home. Is a World War I German hand grenade, deactivated, of course. But I had it a couple of months ago, but I can't find it. So I don't know. Sidebar. If you thought that interview of my grandmother was a good idea, well, you should do the same. I thought it was a great idea after so many years. You can go to the internet and in the search bar, put in the questions to ask grandparents about family history. There's a ton of ideas, questions to ask, and that's something you should do. You'll regret it later on, if you don't. The barber shop. Dad was born in 1909. His sister Eileen was a couple of years older. According to my dad and my grandmother, when Dad was 9 months old, his father abandoned the family. And his mother and Eileen and he had to move in with their grandparents at the home in Lawler at 201 East Spring Street. These are photos of the home taken in the 1940s and 50s and possibly a little after 1960 or so. Dad would die in that home 82 years later. These are a couple of more photographs looking to the east in front of the home on Spring Street, then looking to the west, and then we have a 1960s era looking west again at dusk, and then again during the daylight hours looking to the west. Then we have a photograph taken again in the 1940s looking to the north. It's Doyle's implement in the center. Fire station was on the right side near the fire water tower, and there's a fire siren on top of that fire station. This last photograph was taken from the roof at 201 East Spring Street, and you can see a couple of churches to the left side. The furthest one away is the Mount Carmel Church, a Mount Carmel school in the center, and the old high school to the right. I wish I had better photographs for you, better quality, but this is the best I got. Maybe someone else does. When my dad was 6 years old, he began working at the barber shop. Shine shoes, sweep the floor, other cleanups, whatever the barber wanted him to do. As he got older, he worked at the mill, grinding feed, delivered coal because that's how people heated their homes back in those days, and other odd jobs he could get around town. When he graduated from high school, about 1928, the owner of the barber shop was ready to retire. So Dad bought the barber shop and was the barber for about the next 30 years. This is the main street. Barber shop's on the right, the red building, and a view from front. I don't know who the customer is in this view or in this view. But in addition to the barbershop, Dad was a hunter and fisherman, and along with other collaborators around town, They kept pretty good control of the pheasants, ducks, geese, and whatever else might wander by. My dad also helped control the fish population, both here and in Canada. And of course, he trapped mink and muskrat and sold the pelts to help keep the home warm during the winter months. And when not harvesting animals, Dad was a member of the Lawler Bowling League. Dad started Little League Baseball in Lawler back in the late 40s and early 50s. And something you may not know about, back in the 1950s, Lawler had Boy Scouts, Troop 98. We were a fine group of young men. Around the turn of the century, 1900 or so, my grandfather Michael Keegan built his home at 201 East Spring Street in Lawler. And looking at his Civil War record, he was a commander of an artillery unit for the North during the Civil War. And this is a sword that was in our attic at home on Spring Street. And step back a little bit. This is the kind of sword that was issued to the commanders of artillery units. And since Mike was a commander, this must be his sword. It was in the attic in his house, so I assume he took it home with him. Some of you that knew my mother, you'd be surprised to learn that she made moonshine back during the days of Prohibition. After Dad died in 1992, my mother spent some summers with me and my wife in Minneapolis and wintered in Florida with my sister. One summer we went back to Boston and out to dinner and sitting at the table. My wife's had two nephews that sat across from us, and they were talking about making beer. And there was a lull in the conversation for a few minutes, and then my mother spoke up that she used to make beer, wine, and it's something she referred to as crap. And later, we discovered that to be whiskey. She explained that she made it upstairs in the bedroom because it was warmer up there and the fermenting process would go quicker. Of course, my wife and I looked at each other kind of surprised. We had no idea that she was a moonshiner. And she probably wasn't the only one back in those days. It's an Irish community, and well, that's the way it goes. My mother and her three sisters never drank alcohol. Their parents did, and plenty of it, according to family history. And in our attic, I pretty much, I didn't have many things to do during the summer like most of us kids at that time. We didn't have televisions, we didn't have computers or iPads or iPhones, so we were pretty desperate for things to do. And I researched the attic a number of times, and I knew exactly where everything was and what purpose it had. And as I went through the door to the right, I knew there was a little chest of drawers there, and in one of those chests of drawers was about a dozen crucifixes that came from the caskets people had on the caskets when they died. They were on their way to the cemetery. They were taken off before they were buried. And there was a couple of Kodak box cameras and, the usual stuff, clothes and Christmas decorations. And there was a couple of old chests there. What do they call those? We came along with the Irish when they moved here from Ireland as steamer chests. And there's miscellaneous clothes and stuff. And there was one item there that it was a piece of machinery to clamp a cap on a bottle. And now I knew what that was for. It was the only thing that was a mystery in the attic. I did ask my mother where she got the recipe to make whiskey or wine or beer or anything. And she just looked at me coolly and said, "You don't need to know that." And I asked, who taught you? Coolly, she looks at me again. You don't need to know that either. That pretty much ends the information I have to pass along to you in regard to the Lawler history. What follows now is my time in the military and working for the Customs Service and the Drug Enforcement Administration.